Welcome to Team DataFam Tableau User Group meeting number 45. This TUG works a little bit differently to others because we cater for more the presenter rather than the audience. It's always good to have both. We've got a live audience here today as well, obviously, but we meet at all different times so we can match in with when the presenter is available so we can get some awesome presentations. So if anyone wants to present, please let me know. We do still have some TC25 presentations coming up. We've got one of those today. But you don't need to present at TC25. You don't need to present anywhere, really. If you want to present something, please get in touch. We'll find a time slot for you. My email is team.datafam@gmail.com. But today we have Roshni presenting about accessibility matters. Universal design means data for all. This is a repeat from TC25. So if you weren't at TC25, now's the best time to see it. So I'll hand it over to you, Roshni, and you can take it from here.
Welcome to Accessibility Matters. Universal design means data for all. We're actually going to add data and presentations and documents. You guys are getting sort of the extended version of my TC talk. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Roshni Gohil, and I'd like to thank you all for coming to my talk today. So this talk was inspired by the DataFam, and that's all of you. And I hope it inspires you to bring universal design and accessibility into your Tableau development process. So I'm going to introduce you to universal design through my own experience with a temporary impairment. I'll share what pre-attentive attributes and the pop-out effect are, and what they tell us about universal design for visualization. We'll walk through a bunch of ways to use color, size, and text to build universally usable and accessible dashboards in Tableau. So, what is universal design? Let me tell you about it through my recent adventures in the fractured wrist department. So, I work at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I recently was the fundraising arm of the MIT Sloan School of Management, but until a few months ago, I worked at Matimco, the MIT investment management company, aka the endowment. Matimco's mission is to earn outstanding long-term investment returns for the institute so that students can get great educations and have access to opportunities, and so that faculty and researchers can continue to make discoveries to better understand our universe and solve the world's problems. And one of our goals at Matimco is to cultivate an innovation ecosystem in Kendall Square, Cambridge, the home of MIT. At the same time, we also want to engage and foster the larger community that MIT is part of, the residents of Cambridge, the students, faculty, and staff of MIT and their friends and families, and others who work in or visit the city. And one of the ways we do that is through our real estate department, whose data and processes I supported as an analyst. So not only does Matimco build buildings, bring biotech, tough tech, and other companies and their people to the area, and yes, those are Lego models of some of the buildings that we've built, but we also bring in retail and community spaces to make Kendall Square just come alive and be a place where people want to gather. Last summer, for example, we hosted a pop-up roller rink in what was once a parking lot. That's right, a roller skating rink. We called it Rollerama at Kendall Common. A local artist, Maciel Goulon, designed this amazing swirled mural, I say a swanky Sankey, and engaged her other local artist friends to make it happen. We had live music, free skate rentals, learn to skate events, all the things that you need for an amazing time, and all of it was free and open to the public. And of course, there were food and beverage concessions. Plus, we got to raise money for local nonprofits in the Cambridge area. As Matimco employees, we got to test drive it at a friends and family event the day before it opened. And of course, I skated right over. That day, we took Rollerama for a test glide. We made sure that the liability waivers worked, we checked out the free skate rentals, and we celebrated the work that our colleagues had done to get the space rolling. And as far as skating went, that first day, it went really well. You know, I was a little shaky on my brand new skates, but I didn't fall, and I considered that a win. The next day, on the first official day of business, a Friday afternoon, our summer interns convinced me and some other folks in the office to go skating again. I mean, they really had to twist my arm. I was a little shaky on the skates, but going in basic loops around the rink was no problem, and we were all having a blast. And then I lost my balance. Glasses fell off my head, and I fell. I used my hand to catch my fall, so I had a small scrape on my palm, but the glasses and I came out of that first fall relatively unscathed. No big deal. So I got right back up and continued to skate. And then a while later, I fell again. Again, I used my hand to catch my fall, and this time, though the glasses stayed on, everything did not feel okay. So I had to coast on out of there and hang up my skates. So, well, actually, my office dinosaur, Cyrus, he kind of stole them. I thought maybe I just sprained my wrist. You know, a little rest, no knitting, a little ice, a little compression and stabilizing with a wrist brace, and a little elevation. Rice. everything would be fine in a couple days, right? Well, it was and it wasn't. A few days rolled by and the initial hurt and swelling was gone, but in its place was a different kind of hurt. I was having trouble with little things like turning the handles on the sink faucets and the doorknob on my front door. It hurt when I tried to squeeze water out of the sponge after washing dishes, and stirring anything, just forget about it. And I should mention that the hurt wrist was my left one, and I'm a lefty. So, a trip to MIT Health, some x rays, and I learned that I had fractured my wrist. It was a tiny, teeny little fracture of the radius, some tiny bone shards. I call them bone pebbles, but that's means mainly because I watch a lot of Flintstones. And though there was no surgery, I was stuck in a wrist brace for basically the rest of the summer. I was medically cleared to do just about everything, but I had to wear a wrist brace all the time. I learned a couple of things from this experience. First, listen to Mariah. I don't know how many of you remember the 1995 music video for Fantasy, the one with ODB saying he and Mariah go back like babies with pacifiers. Well, what is Mariah wearing while she rollerblades around the amusement park? I see wrist guards, knee pads, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were also elbow pads on underneath the hoodie. My orthopedist said I could continue to skate provided I wear wrist guards. I now have wrist guards and knee pads and elbow pads. They are literally 6 feet away from me. He also told me that if I fall again, whether because of wheels or not, that instead of putting my hand out to catch myself, I should tuck and roll. That's right, folks, tuck and roll. And I will say, late breaking news, Monday, I had such an incident. I slipped out. My bike slipped in the rain, and I sort of successfully tucked and rolled. I did end up landing on my hand. I did not end up breaking my wrist or any other part of my hand, but there's a little bit of some swelling, but all is good. Anyway, another thing that I learned is that door levers reign supreme. So those faucets and doorknobs that hurt to turn, they looked like this. I had to grip the knob and then turn my wrist. And again, I'm a lefty, so my go-to hand for gripping and turning those faucets and doorknobs, it was my left hand, the one that was attached to the fractured wrist. Fortunately, all the interior doors of my house have levers. Why? Because levers are easier to deal with when you're carrying laundry or groceries or otherwise moving things from one room to another. They simply require a press. No gripping, no turning. In fact, they don't even require hands. There's one door in particular at Matimco that I usually opened while carrying a mug of tea in one hand and a laptop in the other. Whichever elbow was closer to the door, that's the one that pressed down on the lever. And while I was wearing the wrist brace, I could just lean my braced forearm on the lever and voila, the door opened. So while my wrist fracture healed, I had a partial impairment, disability with a lowercase d. Last summer, I simply did not have the same range of motion, the same abilities as uninjured, klutzy, reminder, I did slip out on my bike earlier this week, very klutzy, but still relatively able-bodied me. So that experience, it made me realize that some of the examples of universal design that are all around me, door levers are a great example. They are required in many buildings in the US by the ADA or the Americans with Disabilities Act. Other municipalities and countries have similar disability laws. The really cool thing about levers is they are universally usable, regardless of ability and with no need for adaptation or specialized design. They promote equitable use. Anyone can use them with or without a disability. Kids with tiny hands have an easier time with levers and doorknobs, as do those with arthritis or disabilities gripping with their hands or turning their wrists. And I'm seeing that apparently dogs and cats can sometimes also use levers. Who knew? They are flexible. You can use them right-handed or left-handed. You can use any method or method to open them. Your hand, your forearm, your elbow, your knee, your laptop, the bottom of a maybe very full mug of tea. They're simple and they're intuitive to use. They're easy to perceive and understand, how they're supposed to function. They're easy to operate. They require very little physical effort, and they're usually big enough and at the right level for most people attempting to open a door to use them. These seven universal design principles were developed by a working group of architects and engineers, product designers, and environmental design researchers led by Ronald Mace at the North Carolina State University. They can be used to evaluate existing designs, to guide the design process, and to educate both designers and consumers about what makes usable products more usable and environments more usable. And though I may not call them out, we're going to see them in action throughout this talk. Curb cuts are another familiar example of design intended to provide access to users with disabilities, but that can be usable by all. So let's look at these two curb cuts. The slope just makes it easy to go up and down from the sidewalk to the streets. There's no steps. So with a curb cut, people and dinos in a wheelchair or using a motorized mobility device or even a walker are provided a safe way to get to street level so they can cross the street. And in riding my bike and walking around Cambridge, I'm often seeing instances where curb cuts are helpful for those without visible mobility issues, like a 4-year-old on a scooter followed by a lady pushing a stroller, or the delivery driver with a heavily loaded hand truck trying to make a drop off, or the couple walking their tiny, tiny little dog that could barely reach the top of the curb but could easily walk up the curb cut, or the person with a foldable shopping cart going on a grocery run. Not to mention the couple of times that I was walking my bike with my friends and just had to roll my back across street crossings. So, who uses curb cuts anyway? The curb cut effect, this phenomenon where a much larger population benefits from the positive externalities of something designed to help individuals with disabilities. It's something that we see all over our lives. So, who uses speech to text to send text messages? Or text to speech to hear messages via Bluetooth in their car? How many folks turn on closed captioning on their TVs? All of this technology was designed to improve accessibility for those with disabilities, but it has a much broader usage. Many of these innovations were designed for disability first, but universal design, it goes a step further. It posits that our goal isn't to design for the exception, for the disability, for the other. Rather, we should design more inclusively with an eye to remove barriers to use for everyone from the outset. So build to address a larger range of abilities rather than to solve for a specific disability. The challenge, however, is that sometimes the universal design just isn't going to work for everyone. In fact, Ron Mace's original name for the movement was barrier-free design. In other words, sometimes truly accessible design shouldn't be a this instead, but rather it should be a yes and. So here we have the stairs and the ramp. The stairs are generally quicker, well, and the ramp, well, it provides access. It is the slow and long way, though, to get into the building. Getting into the building, though, is better than not having access at all. In fact, I spy the second set of stairs here, and we'll come back to this set later. So how does this all apply to Tableau? We're taking the ramp to get there, but first, let's count our steps. So some of you may have seen a demo like this before, and I'm adapting it from where I first saw it in one of Colin Ware's books, Information Visualization, Perception for Design. So this is audience participation. Those of you who have a keyboard handy, get ready to type some numbers into the chat. How many 8s do you see in the rainbow frame here? All right, see a couple of 8s popping up, and that's the right answer. But it probably took a lot of scanning through the rows and columns to count every single one of those 8s. The message here, it's hard to find a data point in a sea of sameness. So how many 6s do you see here? I saw a very quick 5 pop up, and that's right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Every 6 here is a darker shade or color intensity than the non-6s. How many 7s? Very quick 3. It was probably very easy because the 7s are in a different color. That different color or hue makes the data pop. In other words, color matters. How many 5s? All right, I'm seeing 3s again, and 3 is the answer, but it kind of took a little while for that number to get into the chat. So, because in order to get here, you had to scan the entire frame. The rainbow of colors, it just wasn't helpful. So, how many 3s do you see here? 8. I saw some relatively quick 8s. The data point here that we're looking for is bigger than all of the others. So increasing the relative size of something can make it easier to see. Size matters. How many 0s? Saw a very quick 9, and they were easy to see here because they had some added weight to them. So making a number bolder makes it pop. How many 9s? Okay, so no lie, there are a lot. There were 11, and this is the most so far. And it may have taken a while to count them, but they were probably amongst the easiest to see. Why? Because we've compounded some of the features we've already seen. The 9s are bigger, they're bolder, and they're in Technicolor. So shape is another feature that can make a mark pop. It can be combined with color or other attributes, But when shape and color mean two different things, that interplay could have some unintended consequences. Here, you might have gotten thrown off a little bit by the non-orange circles. An object's position with respect to others can make a mark more salient, like these twos that are offset from the other marks, and so can enclosures like this and grouping like this. All of these features that we've seen are called pre-attentive attributes, and they contribute to what Colin Ware calls the pop-out effect. When they're used thoughtfully, a combination of pre-attentive attributes will make certain marks or annotations more salient than others. They help things stand out, or pop out. And visualization research has demonstrated that certain features are more effective than others at conveying information. They have more of a pop-out effect. And some are more expressive. They're better suited to express a specific type of data attribute. For example, if you want to show color, want to use color to show quantity, you wouldn't use random colors like the categorical colors on the right here. Instead, you'd use a gradient of the same hue, like on the left. So you'll want to let these ideas of expressiveness and effectiveness color your approach as you go to apply pre-attentive attributes in your work. So speaking of colors and speaking of work, when I visit my mom's house, this is what my remote work setup looks like. The laptop is on the bottom left. It's plugged into a larger monitor above it, and there's a portable monitor on the right. All of these screens are supposed to show the same orange desktop background. They clearly do not. Cindy Lauper, there is no true color shining through here. And that's apparent when you look at a dashboard like on this setup as well. So here's Andy Kriebel's visual vocabulary, the deviation tab. And I do love me a diverging stacked bar chart. So what on earth is happening here? The orange bars disagree and strongly disagree. They're pretty easily distinguishable from everything else. The dark blue strongly agree, also pretty solid. But the gray, neutral, and the light blue agree are only easily distinguishable on the external monitor. On the laptop, they're a little hard to tell apart, and on the portable monitor, not even gonna try. So are my eyes playing tricks on me? Nope. Because I experienced a similar effect in pretty much every conference room I've ever been in. This one in particular is one of the conference rooms at Timco. It's one of our larger rooms, and it happens to be in the corner of the building. And that means there are a lot of windows. There's a projector on the ceiling that projects onto a screen in front of one bay of windows. And on the wall across from the other bay of windows is a monitor. And crudely drawn in here is where my laptop is sitting in the slides that follow, directly in front of and centered under the monitor. So under ideal conditions, the shades on the windows are pulled down, the lights are off, and all three screens show enough contrast between the colors. But here's a zoom in on that diverging stacked bar. While the colors do look slightly different on each screen, I do perceive them, slightly differently. The contrast is pretty clear. There are 5 distinct shades. There's a dark and light orange, a dark and light blue, and a gray in the middle. And I have been in this room for meetings well over 100 times. And of all of those meetings, how many times do you think the shades were actually drawn and the lights were actually off? Pretty sure the answer is 0 or very close to 0. Usually the shades are up, at least partially, if not fully. And on an overcast day or a cloudy day, this is what happens. The projector is just completely washed out, and the distinction between gray and light blue, it's a little harder to see. If it's even partially sunny, just forget it. That projector is toast. And surprisingly, my laptop monitor wasn't doing much better. Only the monitor on the wall seemed to show the colors as distinct enough from each other. And if we turn the lights on, the projector, it's a lost cause. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist. My laptop screen is a little bit better, but only when the light blue bar is long enough. On the bottom bar there, where the light blue is super short, I have to zoom way in on my laptop to see where it meets the gray. And going back to the monitor, again, it's pretty clear, but depending on where you're sitting, the monitor might have a glare from the lights. Remember, those ceiling lights are on. And all of these pictures were taken from straight on. If I had viewed any of these screens from an angle, the contrast probably would have been a little harder to see. All of us, every single one of us, experience these temporary blips in our vision, like when we walk out of a building into full light and have to increase the brightness on our phone screens. These temporary situational vision deficiencies, they're not the only ones that humans experience. You've probably all heard of color blindness, which is a permanent, often genetic color vision deficiency, where a person has decreased or no ability to discriminate between certain colors. So I've used CoBLIS, the color blindness simulator, to show what that diverging bar chart looks like under different types of color blindness. Variations of red-green color blindness, that first full row of images simulated here, those are most common. And while I'm showing all of these different variations, what matters here is not necessarily the actual color that is shown, but something I mentioned a few times earlier, the amount of contrast between the colors. So what is the right amount of contrast to make colors in your vizzes universally or almost universally distinguishable? Well, the fine folks at the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, have developed some standards called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, one of my favorite acronyms, WCAG. These guidelines, they say that an accessible website must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And what are Tableau dashboards but fancy web pages? Like many standards, WCAG standards are revised over time and as technology and our understanding of accessibility improve. And the current standard, version 2.2, was published in October 23, the latest, and updated in December of 2024. But it is not the last version. A working draft of WCAG 3 has been around and periodically updated since January of 2021. And Tableau strives to comply with the standard, but not everything is there yet. And if you're on an older version of Tableau Server, for example, chances are that WCAG 2.2 didn't even exist then. So assume at best 2.1 compliance if you're on server. And there are always going to be some things that do not comply out of the box. And it's your job as a Tableau designer to make the right choices to ensure that your visualization complies with the relevant guideline. So we came to WCAG because we wanted to know, well, what is the right color contrast? So what do the WCAG standards say about perceivability of color contrast? Well, for normal text, let's call it under size 18. And I'm just pulling a number out there. There actually is no size limit or size threshold for font sizes in WCAG standards, because the idea is that any screen that you're seeing on the web, the user should be able to zoom in. So let's just pretend, though, that it is 18 font. So the color contrast ratio between the text color and its background color should be at least 4.5 to 1 on that at a minimum for normal size text. And as text gets larger, the contrast ratio gets smaller, so 3 to 1 at minimum. If you remember when I zoomed in on that bottom bar, as the bar got bigger, it was easier to see the contrast. The same idea is represented here in why that large text 3 to 1 ratio is smaller than the normal text one. And for non-text elements, so that is the actual bars in those diverging bar charts, it should be 3 to 1 as well. So how do you calculate that? No idea. I use on the internet a color contrast checker like this one from webaim.org. You put in the colors that you have, and it will let you know what WCAG tests and compliance standards passed. So this excerpt from a chart is one of the inspirations for this presentation. So it was actually shared at a MITIMCO staff meeting, and the presenter was talking about how the red dots, and they joked like they couldn't actually tell which dots were red versus blue. And running the colors through a contrast checker demonstrates that they really are hard to distinguish. The contrast just isn't there. 1.34 to 1, does not fly. So when I worked in MIT's central fundraising department, this was before MITIMCO, I was tasked with building out a style guide. And one of the elements in that style guide was determining what colors to use to highlight content in tooltips. So we tested MIT's colors. It's a cardinal red, a variety of grays, along with Tableau's default blue and orange, all against both a white background and a black background. What did we learn? Well, the easiest, and I'm going to emphasize here, the easiest option that passed was Tableau blue against a white background. And I'm a lazy developer. If I don't have to set up a color palette, I'm going to go that route. Well, we tried it. And you know what other text is blue on the web? Links. That's right. People saw this blue text in these tooltips, and they kept trying to click on the blue text to open up a link. And I pretty much just wanted to bury my head in the sand and probably smack myself in the face as well, because it was a facepalm moment for me. I was so stuck on these color contrast ratios and trying to be the laziest developer that I could be and not have to set up a custom color palette that I completely missed something so very obvious. So forget color vision deficiencies. I had tunnel vision deficiency here. Well, you know what color did pass? MIT red. And though, again, it required adding that color to our color palettes, and we were going to do it anyway. Even lazy developer me knew that it was the right answer. It was clear from both the color contrast checking that we did using WebAIM's contrast checker and through usability testing with our actual users. We found out, MIT red for text highlights against a white background was the right choice. And on that, one other thing that we did with our colors is run them through the codeless color blindness simulator, and then we used a color picker to grab those numbers or those simulated colors and ran the simulated colors through a contrast checker. This two-step process ensured that not only did we have high enough contrast for users with normal vision, but also for most users with color vision deficiencies. And if you've gone through an exercise like we did to ensure that the colors that you're using have sufficient contrast, what do you do next? How do you make them reusable? So Tableau lets you store custom color palettes in a preferences.tps file in your Tableau repository. You can then share that file with others in your organization to ensure that you're all using the same accessible color palettes. Creating the file does require knowing some XML, though I believe newer versions of Tableau actually have a color palette builder built into the desktop GUI. But let's say you don't want to mess with the XML. Another tool that I absolutely adore is the Color Manager for Tableau by Alex Wletzek. You don't have to actually know what the hex codes are or anything like that for this. You can basically just copy and paste, text from your company's brand page and just throw them into the text box here and simply generate and update your preferences.tps file. It's a little bit of clicking and dragging and dropping, some copying and pasting, and it's a huge time saver. And if you really need to stick to your brand palette and it doesn't offer sufficient contrast, there are some alternatives. So you can provide those that need a higher contrast or colorblind friendly palette an option through a simple user-operated color palette to switch between the high contrast and the regular color palette. So this is kind of that ramp in addition to the stairs idea here. So Andy Kriebel has put together a super short video on it, and it's 3 steps. You create a Boolean parameter, you add it to the mark shelf and switch it to color, and then you assign a colorblind friendly palette. 3 super simple steps to give your users the access to both the stairs and the ramp. And so far we've looked purely at color, but what about when we mix it with other attributes? So if you look at the line chart at the top, the blue and green lines kind of start to look the same to me as they get closer to each other. And if you look at the bottom chart, I've added a shape to each line to make it easier to differentiate central versus west. So even if the blue and green blend, it's really hard to confuse a circle with a square. Sorry, with a star. And remember that blue and red dot example that inspired this presentation? Well, replacing the red dots with red stars would have helped make that low color contrast less of an issue. And here are some toggles. The type I see most in the wild, and not just in Tableau workbooks, is that pair on the left. It's just a toggle switch with a difference in color to presumably show on versus off. Every single time I look at a toggle like this, I still need to think through, wait, is this on or is this off? And then I need to click it a few times to figure it out. And you know what really helps? Adding a shape or words to differentiate. The check means it's on. Great. Oh, it actually says that it's off. Wonderful. Unambiguous and clear. These 2 examples demonstrate a WCAG principle around the use of color, namely that it shouldn't be the only way that you convey a particular piece of information. Not everyone sees colors, and as we saw earlier, not everyone sees colors the same way. And heck, the same person may not even see color the same way depending on lighting conditions, the device being used, and other situational elements. So adding context through shape, size, text, whatever, to reinforce what you're trying to convey through color, we call this reinforcement double or multiple encoding, that has the potential to help all of your users. And when combining shape and color, you do want to be careful. Here we've applied color and shape to show different attributes of the data. That multiplies the number of options a person has to keep track of and can make a chart even more confusing. So don't mix your encodings. And finally, one more thing, be consistent. If you're using color to highlight a type of 80s leg accessory, do it consistently. Don't use orange to highlight slouch socks and red for leg warmers in one chart and then switch it in the next chart. Just don't do it. And with that, we're done with color. Let's glide on over to size. And folks, I'm going to get real here. Size really does matter for your Tableau dashboards. So this is a very important page in the Tableau documentation, and I don't want you to actually read it. Instead, I want you to look at the screen and squint. That's right, scrunch your eyes up really small and stare at the screen. What do you see? What stands out? All right, you can stop squinting. Does this look a little like what you saw when you squinted? What we just did was a squint test. The squint test is a design trick that helps you get an idea of how the elements on your screen are grouped and helps you understand the visual hierarchy on the page. The big things, the headers, are what's emphasized. Everything that got a little blurry, not so much. All right, here is the Tableau or Tug homepage, usergroups.tableau.com. You all went there to get to this recording, I hope. I'm a Tableau ambassador, so I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you to go join a user group or multiple. There's one for everyone, and if there isn't one, you can start one. Colin Smith and Emily Kuhn, for example, started the accessibility tug a couple years ago because there was a need. And if you want to learn more about tugs, go to usergroups.tableau.com or feel free to DM me on the Tableau community Slack. Right. All right. Wait, let me get back to our regularly scheduled program. Let's try the squint test again on this page. All right, ready, set, squint. All right, you can stop squinting. It probably looked a little like this. Again, big letters, all big and bold. The surprise here, though, is that image also popped. Images can be a really great tool, but they can also steal attention, especially when they are so big. Here, it's effective. In a viz, it depends. And on a viz, there may also be additional accessibility concerns you should be aware of. So, speaking of a viz, let's try the squint test on the deviation tab of Andy Kriepel's visual vocabulary. All right, squint. All right, you can stop. This is probably what that looked like. And again, we've got headers. So let's talk about headers. WCAG has a couple of guidelines on headings. Basically, you should have them, and they should help you describe a topic or purpose or organize content. Seems simple enough, so how do you make that happen? First, we want to use typography to set up a visual hierarchy. The Big Book of Dashboard says that you should use 3 levels of font types and sizes, top level, mid level, and low level, to help your users see how the viz is organized and to help them understand the relative importance of and the relationship between the elements of the dashboard. So how does this 3-level font hierarchy apply to the deviation dashboard we looked at earlier? Well, deviation, the dashboard title, is the top level font. Individual chart titles or view titles are the mid-level font, and everything else is basically low level. And this font hierarchy is something you're probably already familiar with from presentation tools. The slide title is a top level font. The top level text is mid-level, and everything else is low level. A well-designed presentation template will have these different font sizes in the layout options. So use them and make sure that the smallest font is readable for your intended audience. And that can differ based on your presentation channel, on a big screen versus printouts versus individual users' monitors. And if necessary, go in and adjust the slide master or the template to make sure the text stays readable. And just because the template has a 5th level, it doesn't mean that you should use it. But wait, sorry, I'm full of tangents today. So here's a new one. I've been in plenty of meetings where we simply go through a slide in a PowerPoint or a PDF like it's a static image. Remember the squint test? This is what that sampled slide looks like to your audience when you present everything all at once. First, they see the big things. They don't pay attention to the little things. They've skipped ahead to the other headers. And while you're still talking about the things in the top bullet, they're looking at the side. They may be reading ahead and not paying attention to what you're talking about. So what is the alternative? So as I think I mentioned earlier, I ride a bicycle around Cambridge and Boston, and I tend to dress in high vis with reflective stripes. Almost, but not quite like this guy who's wearing a full reflective bodysuit. To some drivers, the sky is just a blob of reflective. Could be a sign in the distance, but not necessarily indicative of a moving bicyclist on the road. So you want to know what works better? Reflective ankle straps. Why? The stripe from a moving reflective element provides other road users more information about what they're seeing and that it's moving, the same way the flash from the wheel reflectors function here. It catches their eye more, and motion just makes you more visible. And though it wasn't on the image I showed above, the reason behind that is motion is another pre-attentive attribute. PowerPoint and other presentation tools, they have motion. So you can selectively show text. So when someone asks, are you reading this? The answer might actually be yes this time. So let me skip all the way through that. If you do have multiple mid and low level fonts, use motion to display them selectively. Motion not only captures your audience's attention, things move, my eyes want to follow them. Just don't give the audience the opportunity to skip ahead to the last mid-level headers while you're still talking about the stuff under the first one. Keep the focus on what you're talking about. So back to Tableau. That's the end of the tangent. Just like PowerPoint has style settings in the Style Master and Google Drive has themes, Tableau has workbook settings, which you can get to via the Format menu and then Workbook. So deviation, your top level font here in this Tableau workbook, it should be tied to your dashboard titles font. The chart titles, your mid-level font, should be tied to your worksheet titles font, and everything else, your low-level font, should be tied to worksheets. So let's say you've played around with all of these size settings and you found a combination of fonts that you really like and it tests well with your users and you want to reuse it. Maybe you want to share it with others on your team to build a consistent and usable template. In 2025.1, Tableau introduced a new custom themes feature. Set your settings via the format menu in Workbook, like we just saw, and then you export that custom theme from that same format menu, and which generates a JSON file, which if you want, you can go in and edit, but you don't have to. When you want to then use your new custom theme, you import it, again, via the format menu. What if you want to make edits, but you also want to do it in a more graphical manner? That's where the custom theme generator developed by Law Database, aka Tristan Gullivan and Jessica Bautista, comes into play. This free tool allows you to generate new custom themes as well as import and tweak an existing one. And if being able to set all your styles, viz styles easily isn't enough, I want to make one more plug for an accessibility feature that is really easy to overlook, but that can be key to helping your low or no vision users see the visual hierarchy of your viz. WCAG recommends that the structure of a document, the relationship between the parts of a dashboard, be programmatically determined or available in text. What does that actually mean? Well, in a PowerPoint, it's going back and using those default layouts and creating and labeling sections. They've been coded to help with navigation. In a Word doc, you use styles, the headers, title, heading 1, and so on, to build out a navigation guide. You don't just rely on a combination of bold, underline, italics, font size, all of that to convey a message. Instead, use the document structure to do so. Using styles means that you can build out a dynamic and linkable table of contents. It means that folks can use the built-in sidebar to navigate by clicking around or searching in the headers. And it means that if you convert a file to a PDF, those styles also translate over to that file, again, making the document more searchable and scannable. And if we really want to think about accessibilities, those headers play really nicely with screen readers, which are an assistive technology that literally reads what's on the screen out loud for users with low or no vision. Those structural elements in Word docs and PDFs, they convey information, they convey structure, they convey relationships, as recommended by WCAG. So how does that apply to Tableau? Well, simply put, use the built-in dashboard and view tiles instead of using text boxes or creating dummy sheets for dynamic titles. Why is that important? Again, screen readers. Usually use the keyboard to navigate in a screen reader using Tab, enter and arrow keys to access different parts of the page, or in our case, of a dashboard. So when a screen reader sees a standalone text box or a dummy no content view that's used for a dynamic title, it reads the title, department, and that's it. It's not very helpful to the user. Compare it to when you use the worksheet title. Then the screen reader reads the title, department, and it also sees that it is structurally related to the chart, and it goes on to read the chart for the consumer. So department, data visualization, bar chart of blah, blah, blah. Those structural elements in Tableau, they convey information, they convey structure, they convey relationships, all the things that the WCAG guidelines recommend. And I want to talk a little bit more about screen readers. Yet another tangent, sorry guys. So show of hands, who here has actually used a screen reader? And if you've used one, which screen reader or screen readers have you used? Feel free to put answers in the chat. I see one hand raised. Well, JAWS is one of the answers in the chat. So this is a chart that the WebAIM folks, I did not make this, WebAIM made this. These are the same folks behind my go-to color contrast checker. They do an annual survey. This is the 2024 survey of screen reader users, and the results are in this lovely little bar chart. So I'm a Windows user, and Windows has Windows Narrator. It's not the best out there. In fact, I think it's complete trash. With Tableau workbooks. When I tried it earlier in the year in the browser with both Tableau Public and Tableau Server on both Windows 10 and 11, it picked up almost nothing. So if you are a Windows user, what are your alternatives? NVDA, non-visual desktop access, is a free tool, and it is my go-to on Windows, and we're going to see it in action in a moment. JAWS, Job Access with Speech, and Zoom Text are alternatives. They both have a cost. I've used JAWS. It's been over a decade, and I remember nothing, but it does have good usage in the WebAIM survey, and I know it's been the go-to in a lot of higher education institutions for a while. And if you're not a Windows user, VoiceOver is the built-in screen reader for macOS and iOS devices, and Orca is a common one on Linux machines. And a lot of browsers these days also have either an extension or even a built-in screen reader that you can use. I have not used any of those alternatives, but I have heard good things about VoiceOver for Macs. So here we're going to see what that example I showed you earlier.
University space used analysis. Department visualization controls toolbar undo button redo button unavail department.
So I tried tabbing over to
Department.
see what happens when department is used as a title
Navigation
and a standalone.
Landmark. Application. Department section. Data visualization. Applicate department section.
So
data visualization.
I clearly have not watched this video in a while. So that's what happened when department is a standalone text object. I tried tabbing over to get from the title to the chart, no dice. It just moved along to the next object, which was a completely different chart. I tried like resetting and kept trying to get department to do more than just say department and actually tell me, well, what chart is this related to? And again, nothing.
University space used in.
So here is what it looks like when you use the built-in sheet title.
Application, department. Data visualization. Bar chart of area department / use type, color applied to in / out of combo set 3, detail applied to min building count department, detail applied to min total building count, detail applied to department or use.
So I can tab from the title right into the chart. And while the actual description of the chart is very rough, and for someone who is not used to using a screen reader, it takes quite a bit of experience to really get used to it, I guess. But the cool thing is here, the title is actually very much connected to the title of the chart. And it allowed me to dig right into the chart. And in a few minutes, I'll show you a way to fix the chart description so you can actually have something that is a little less trash. So anyway, we're going to move on slightly from this and look at these two charts. So would you believe me if I said the only difference between them is the size of the shapes? If I were to tell you that there's a tooltip on the red mark at the top, I'm betting you'd probably pick the chart on the left to use. Because that tooltip, or that red dot is a little bigger. You can see the shape more clearly and you'd be able to hover over it more successfully. So how many of you prefer using a Bluetooth mouse instead of the trackpad or touchpad that's built into your laptop? I'm going to pretend I see hands raised, and I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a whole lot of hands raised. And if I told you that your mouse battery died and you don't have that spare and you kind of have to use the touchpad, how bad is that going to be? I'm going to bet that you're going to be really, really annoyed because you just don't have the same motor control that you do with an external mouse. Marks, buttons, and controls like filters, they're all interactive elements that you need to be able to point to hover over or click or use a keyboard to get to. But if the interactive element is too small for you to use effectively, if the target of your interaction is too small, that can be a problem. Fortunately, I learned while setting up this demo, marks actually tend to have a little bit of an extra halo around them, so this specific scenario isn't as bad as it seems. But buttons and controls, they're a completely different story. So fortunately, WCAG has some guidelines around things that need to be pointed to. They say the target size should be a minimum of 24 by 24 pixels. The enhanced guideline, which makes websites more usable on touch devices like your phone or a tablet, that says 44 by 44 pixels. So quick pop quiz. How much larger is the enhanced button than the minimum? This is a math question. I'm sorry, I know I didn't warn you guys that you're going to have to do math. All right, I'm not going to make you do the math, actually. So Chris is right. It is almost 4 times as large, 3.36 times larger for the enhanced versus the minimum. And for folks who have difficulty moving the mouse or using a touch device, the extra space on that enhanced standard is a very welcome change. So the good news is that by default, navigation buttons in Tableau are 52 pixels high, which is great. Show hide buttons, though, those are only 24 by 24 pixels by default, which again, can be a little harder to use on a touch device. For those in any custom buttons, like the ones you may create using shapes on a view, aim for 44 by 44 pixels at minimum. That will make the button big enough to be usable on more devices by more users, which is beginning to sound a lot like universal design. And with that, we're done with size. Let's learn to use our words. So let's talk about icons. One of my favorite features when it was first released was the show hide button on layout containers. The ability to let the user show or hide extra stuff, but still have that helpful stuff available so that I could just make better use of the screen real estate I had. It's amazing. And when I worked in fundraising the first time around, we tried to implement it on a dashboard that had a lot of filters that most people just weren't going to use much. We used a simple funnel icon similar to what you see in Excel to show, hey, here's the filters. And we thought that would be enough. But during usability testing this dashboard, we found out that it was not. Users just didn't seem to get what that icon meant. So we changed tracks completely and went to an all words option. Again, somehow, show filters, hide filters, users missed it completely, or they didn't know what filters meant in this context. We weren't really sure. We came away thinking that we just weren't using the right words for them. So I changed tracks completely again and went to this wrench and sprocket design with the words show settings, words, and an icon. The good news is that people saw it, but well, they thought it wasn't for them. The gear made them think it was more like iPhone settings, so Tableau app settings, not filters for that dashboard. But the really cool thing is that we finally learned in having those discussions that filters was actually the right word. We just didn't have it set up right the first several times. So we finally settled on this version with both a filter and sort icon similar to Excel and the word show filters. And in testing, people got it. The icon was familiar enough, the words were clear enough, so hallelujah. What we learned is that using an icon alone presented an issue with understanding. Like, what the heck does that icon even mean? What happens if I click here? The very small amount of text that you have room for on a neat little button, it may not be enough context for a user to know with certainty what will happen if they click that button. And that's where providing a text alternative for a button is key to improving usability and accessibility. So, do I have to say the words? Yes, Brian Adams, you do. The good news is that buttons in Tableau have tooltips. And when you go to edit a show hide button, for example, you have this option to update the tooltip so that when you hover, show buildings appears. The accessibility win here is that tooltips on buttons are screen reader accessible out of the box. So that additional context that's provided for sighted users is also usable by low or no vision users. These tooltips are a universal design win. You're adding this extra context that just happens to also help all of your users navigate. When I started looking at this university space use analysis workbook from Tableau Public to find examples to use for this presentation, I was thoroughly confused by this orange mouse pointer icon on the right. It's on here 3 different times, but somehow I thought it was a show hide button. That's what I'm used to seeing, right? Well, clicking it did nothing. So I opened up the workbook to investigate, and I learned it was actually an image. Just an image. There are no words here, just none. I was a little slow to notice that there was also a gray crossed out version of that same exact icon that appeared twice on the dashboard. It took me far too long to realize that that orange version that the chart it accompanied was interactive, and the gray version meant the chart was not. I was annoyed. I mean, I figured it out, but I was so annoyed. Now imagine if all you could see was that this thing was an image. You had no idea what the image was, why it was there. You couldn't distinguish the difference between the orange and the gray versions. That's what happens when you use a screen reader on an image in Tableau. That is, unless you add alt text. So when you add alt text image, you can provide users that use screen readers information about what's in the image. Is it purely decorative or does it actually serve a purpose? And adding a description of the image, if applicable, and more importantly, the purpose it serves, that provides key information to users who cannot see the image or cannot see it well. And alt text is in all the apps, well, most of them. In PowerPoint, you can easily right-click on an object or go to the Format ribbon, and some tools will even provide an AI starter for you to edit. But you can edit that text or just add your own alt text manually. And my favorite feature is this ability to mark images as decorative if they simply are a design element. You might want to do this with logos, like if you have a logo for your, for your brand or for your company on a PowerPoint deck. That tells screen readers to ignore or at least indicate that the image isn't conveying content, and it reduces the noise for low or no vision users. In fact, alt text goes beyond images in Tableau, which is really cool. So you can now add alt text to views. So if you right click on a worksheet on a dashboard or go to the worksheet menu, you'll see this accessibility option. Tableau, just like that default that came out of PowerPoint, it will actually generate alt text for you. It's very similar though to the automatic caption that you're probably already familiar with. As with captions, you can edit the alt text to make it more useful and informative, because bar chart of area, department / use type, color applied to in / out of blah, blah, blah. Not very helpful, not very useful at all. And if what I read aloud sounded familiar, it really should be, because that screen reader demo, that's the exact text it was reading out loud. though in a much better robot voice than I did. I promised I'd show you where to fix that word salad. This is where you fix it. And in case you missed it, the extra bonus here is that alt text on the worksheet is screen reader accessible out of the box. So with captions, the caption has to be visible on the dashboard in order for a screen reader to make use of it. They can feel like, for your sighted users, all that text is just cluttering up the viz. With alt text, the description is hidden from sighted users, reducing potential clutter on the dashboard. But wait, you say alt text is hidden from users not using screen reader? Yeah, that's right, Cyrus. Sometimes things aren't built for everyone, and that's okay. Yes, Lego Cyrus, I am supposed to be talking about universal design. That means building for everyone. Phew! Thank goodness Flex has my back. There's an additional feature that can be used alongside alt text that is usable without a screen reader, and that's called the data guide. And yes, Melismata, I heart data too. And please note that Melismata's name does not rhyme with data or data, but she's sassy, and I can guarantee she has opinions on how that word is said. So let's come back from that tangent. So in Tableau Server and Tableau Cloud, there's this button in the top right that looks like a signpost. It's the data guide. Click on it. When you have a viz selected, the top portion includes details about the viz, including a description and optional links to additional resources like videos or wiki pages or your company's knowledge base or a document repository. When you don't have a viz selected, it shows a description of the dashboard and even more optional links. You can fill out all of that information, customize it to what you need to share with your users. So how do you get to it? In desktop, that same little signpost lets you edit the guide, updating the description, resource links, all of that for both the dashboard or the viz. And on the viz data guide, there's this nifty other way to access the alt text. So for the viz, so if you wanted to make both the viz description and the alt text identical, you can do that from one screen right here. So we've seen a case where accessible design means extra steps, but what about those extra steps I pointed out in the barrier-free environment sketch? Those steps are a way for more able-bodied people to get to another level of the building, but they aren't for those with some mobility issues. And unfortunately, Tableau has a little bit of that too, though things are changing. One of my favorite features in Tableau is in tooltips. Like they help you add extra information, and with viz in tooltips, you can put that information into easy to digest charts. The problem is that tooltips on vizzes are not fully accessible, or at least they won't be until 2025.3 is released, which I think is happening soon. So what do? Ideally, everything we build is accessible via keyboard navigation and compatible with assistive technology like screen readers. Ideally, we make sure that the ramp is available and structurally sound. And as noted in the Tableau docs, all of the dashboard objects that are outlined in pink on the left and all of the features pictured on the right, they all provide that solid accessible structure. But if the ramp can't get somewhere, we need to bring the content to the ramp. And one of the simplest ways to do that is via view data. It's not the best way to serve up data, but if the choice is between providing access to the extra information versus not providing it at all, I'd rather provide the data. And making sure your end users can view data and download full data and anything that's contained within the tooltips or viz in tooltips via view data, that just makes the data rollerama open to everyone. Whew, that was a very fast loop around the roller rink of universal design and accessibility, and I hope you can take a few things away from this talk. First, remember the pop-out effect and how pre-attentive attributes contribute to building more universal usable design. Design techniques like the squint test and user research techniques like usability testing, along with tools like color contrast checkers and color blindness simulators, can help you refine your design choices. And once you've got something that works, operationalize it by putting into themes. Use custom color palettes and custom themes. Use tools like Alice Wozniak's Color Manager for Tableau and LaDataViz's custom theme generator. Those types of tools can really simplify the process for you. Second, words matter. Data viz is about more than just the data. You need to provide pathways for sighted users and those with vision deficiencies, for users with motor issues and those without. All users need to be able to get to the data and also understand the data and its context. The other side of words is advocacy. Usability and accessibility can be easily overlooked when building Tableau dashboards or documents or PowerPoint decks or whatever. So just stop it. Mention color blindness, mention descriptions, mention button sizes, all the other things I talked about, all of that when you're sharing a new dashboard design or a slide deck. And join the accessibility tug. Share your own stories of disability if you're comfortable doing so. And finally, test, test, and test again. Don't just make sure that clicking this button makes that thing happen or clicking a bar filters another chart. That's user acceptance testing or UAT. That's necessary, but it is not sufficient. Also, make sure you test your dashboards with actual users to make sure the dashboards help your users meet their goals. Don't make assumptions about what your users know or what they can see and are seeing or what they can easily interact with. Instead, test with them, observe them to confirm that what you've built is both usable and accessible. Universal design and accessible design, they go hand in hand. Sometimes one shakes into a cool little flip like this, or maybe the other rattles around a bit, but often they simply rock and roll in sync. So thank you so much. And if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or DM me on the Tableau community Slack.
That was awesome. That was a very good rundown on just everything, right?
I hope it wasn't too much. But again, these talks are recorded, so you should go check out the recording on the DataFam YouTube channel when it's available.
Yep, definitely. And no one else is actually going to say anything. There was the comment in there about getting all the links to all the resources and everything that you've got, so we'll tee that up later as well.
Yes.
I hope you've got that in the document somewhere.
It is. I will share the slide link with you, so you can put it on the user groups page.
Perfect. And no one's got any questions. Interesting.
I think I may have broken some rules of accessibility here by overloading too much information.
That's cool. But it's all good stuff to refer back to. So it's all those little tips. I didn't realize that Tableau had deliberately made things the size that match the WCAG standard as well. So that's even better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cool accessibility improvements that happen with every single version of Tableau. The accessibility tug, we usually have Blake Burgess from Tableau come and sort of share what's next on the docket, or what's coming soon, what the team is looking at. So it's sorry to just keep promoting the accessibility tug, but It's a great tug if you are interested in learning what's new with accessibility, or learning about different aspects of accessibility in Tableau that you may not be aware of with your users or with potential users.
Yep. There's no need to apologize about promoting tugs. I do it all the time for a lot of other different tugs. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of content. It's the challenge sometimes getting through it, but there's no end to the content that's there, and obviously every tug's got its own little focus as well, which is good.
Great, yeah.
There's Roshni's contact details. Well, not actually her contact details, but she's a co-leader of both of those tugs as well, both HE tug and the accessibility tug. And again, just go to the user group's Tableau website and join as many tugs as you need to, as you'd like to. Oversubscribe's even better, and then you get notifications about when those events are coming up. Either those tugs put their recordings on YouTube, or it'll be on the Team DataFam channel as well, whichever. There's always a way to actually get to that recorded content. Okay, we'll move on. So fast 5, as I said before, 5 quick questions, quick answers. There's no right or wrong answer. It's your personal preference. The questions have been written to be your personal preference answers, as in it's just what you feel at the time. Sometimes I ask for people to submit questions. I do get questions sometimes, but this set is just AI generated. It was just ones I picked out for you individually. And if you find the questions too hard, just feel free to pass if you need to as well.
Oh dear, I'm a little terrified now. If there's hard questions, I wasn't expecting that, Chris.
I'll ramp up to it. So I think the first question is quite easy, but again. So first question, do you prefer light or dark backgrounds in Tableau?
I prefer light backgrounds in Tableau, but my phone and my Slack, my code editor, those are all dark mode all the time. But my Tableau gotta be light mode.
Yep, awesome. See, easy question, right?
That's only the first one.
It ramps up. Question 2, do you usually include tooltips or keep visuals clean and simple?
I tend to provide tooltips only because people always want more information. And it's this hard balance of like how much information do you then throw onto the tooltip? I mean, first off, there's all of the accessibility concerns, But then there's also like, well, if they're going to want that piece of information, they're also going to want this piece of information. So like I have definitely built tooltips that are just like a page of text and, you know, numbers and blah, blah, blah. And while it makes me hurt inside, I have found that information to be useful to my end users. And it really is all about what is helpful to your end users, what helps them reach their goals. And if not having a tooltip means that they're just stuck, then that's not helping them reach their goal. So it really depends again on what do your users want. So usually there's a tooltip.
Yep, no, definitely. And question 3, how do you feel about letting users interact with parameters and filters themselves?
Yes. Give them the controls. You know, there are intelligent defaults that you can set. You know, if you know that 90% of the time they're just going to want to look at, you know, their own data or data on this piece, like you can set an intelligent default. But for the other 10 or 20 or even 50% that they're looking for something else, give them the control to be able to figure, you know, find the information they need themselves. There's no reason that you need to be the bottleneck or gatekeep data, as provided, you know, all the security rules are in place that allow them to see only the data they're supposed to see.
Yep. Which leads into the next question, I think. Do you like dashboards that surprise people or reassure them?
Ooh, that's a good one. See, this is a hard one. Oh man.
Told you, Brent.
You know, a lot of the dashboards that I build are more around, I'm not going to say compliance because it's not really compliance. It's really just helping people get through their daily work, and keep on top of. And I work with fundraisers, so keep on top of their portfolios. I prefer that those dashboards do reassure them. They, you know, don't, like, they're not seeing a surprise. Oh man, you know, this really big gift came in, or this really big gift did not come in. What the heck? Like, I hope that they're, you know, they have enough information about their portfolios or about whatever it is that they're looking at, to not be surprised. But sometimes that surprise is good. Like sometimes they, you know, add a lot of fire under someone or makes them realize, oh crap, like this looks really bad because, well, I forgot to enter this data or I forgot to do whatever housekeeping I needed to do in order to actually reflect the action that was taken. So I can I say both, or it depends? Because, you know, I don't think I can choose.
Everything depends. But again, that's the right answer, right? It's like, I would actually say it depends on the dashboard, because some dashboards you're designing to surprise people, and sometimes you're designing to reassure them. It's a situation. It depends. It depends is the answer for everything, right?
But, you know, the only way that you know what the right answer is for that particular situation is to understand your users, actually talk to them, understand their goals, understand why you're building them a dashboard.
Yeah, for sure. Easy. And the final question, when you build, do you work fast and iterate or slowly and precisely?
So it depends on which part. Depends. Okay, so the data, slowly and precisely. Like you want to make sure that you have a good solid foundation in your data. Like you don't want to be building dashboards that, you know, have gaps in data or that just have bad or incorrect data. So the data got to be slow and precise. You got to do your fact checking, you got to validate all of that stuff. The building itself, fast and iterate. Like get things in front of people, even if they're not fully fleshed out, even if they don't look super pretty, just to get an idea of, is this helpful to them? Does it actually help them do whatever it is they need to do? Does it give them the information that they need? Because you could, you know, have the assumptions about what they need. You could build something out. You can put a lot of time into building something out, and then you put it in front of them. They're like, what the heck is this? Mm-hmm. Like, this is not useful to me. So slowly and precisely for the data, fast and iterative for the dashboard.
Easy. Perfect. See, you got through the 5. Simple.
Whew. All right. That was way more stressful than the talk.
So jumping tangents again, and I think everyone's going to be interested in this one, the same as today's, is Marcelo is coming in, next week sometime. You've got time to register. All the times are there on the screen. It's just one meeting. So again, early in the day for Australia and APAC side of the world, and it depends on where you are in the US. But Marcelo is going to be launching something that will help everyone with Tableau dashboards. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm not going to ruin the surprise. But it will be awesome to actually see this released. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. So that's good. Come along to the presentation or watch the recording later on. So the same as this session, and a lot of online tugs are on YouTube somewhere. So a lot of them are on Team DataFam, or they've got their own channels. All the Team DataFam recordings are also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Why? Because there was a question, and I sort of had that question as well, is you can't just be sitting watching YouTube stuff all the time. There's other things to do. So maybe while you're riding your bike and stuff like that, you can listen to podcasts and then come back and actually watch those things later on. And my tip for that, I do that sometimes with the podcast. When you actually listen to the intro, there's part of the intro I put in to say, I forget the exact wording, but it's something about, you might need to go back and watch this recording on YouTube. And because I'm suggesting you would do that. There's other presentations where you could just listen to it and get most of the information out. And then you probably won't hear that little bit of audio in there, and you can just listen to it on the podcast as well. Your choice, it doesn't matter. There's at least 3 different ways to consume that content there. And as I said at the start, my email is team.datafam@gmail.com. So if anyone wants to present feedback, provide me some fast 5 questions, whatever, email me and get some further details from there. But again, thank you, Roshni, for your time. I know we went over on the time estimate. Again, I don't care. It's recorded. People can go and watch it later. It's all good to get that content recorded. So thank you for that. But one last thing is IronViz is running right now. We have until the 21st of November to submit, so that's a week away. This year's theme is food and drink. If you don't know what IronViz is, go to the website and look at the details. Go to YouTube and look at previous IronViz competitions. It's well worth entering. As the motto says, win or learn, you can't lose. There's some great prizes to win if you actually get into the top 10 or even get on stage at Tableau Conference next year. So time is running out. What's Jacob saying? If you're only just starting now, what do you mean if you're only just starting now?
I think if you're only just starting to put your data set together and starting your submission, right?
Well, even when it first came out, I went, I've got this brilliant idea, and I said, my data collection is going to take far too long to actually do it. So yes, I still haven't come up with an idea yet, but I don't participate every year. I know people who've participated every single year. It's good, but you might not get on stage, but you'll actually learn something and you can win some great prizes as well. But that's all for me. Thank you, Roshni, for your time. This recording will be up as soon as possible, and we'll get those links for the different resources as well.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Okay.
And everyone.
No worries. Okay, thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.